Does the world need another chair design? How has furniture shaped the world we live in today? Why is furniture design such a bellwether for creatives around the globe? I'm Danny Cheung, furniture designer, industrial designer, and die-hard design enthusiast. Join me and my guests as we examine this highly influential corner of the design universe. It's furniture design out of the closet. This is modern furniture design. Have you ever wondered what it might be like working with one of the big names in design? My guest today is Goodrum, one of Australia's top furniture designers, and he shares with us his experience of working with Capellini, one of the great Italian design houses. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Can you maybe give our listeners who are listening in on the podcast a description of the Stitch chair?
Sure. The Stitch chair was a furniture piece, a chair that I designed after I finished university. We had a project in third year university to design a folding chair. And after that project, I never really designed a piece of furniture before that project. And after that project, I kind of became very obsessed, one with furniture and also mechanisms and that kind of thing. So when I left university, I lost the workshop. I used to spend a lot of time in the workshop making things and that kind of thing. So I lost the workshop and my kitchen table really became my workshop, I guess. So I started working with cardboard and paper and that kind of thing. And I set myself a brief to design a folding chair which would hopefully fold as flat as it could, but it wouldn't necessarily read as a folding chair. You know, quite often folding furniture has a bit of a second-class citizen kind of feel to it. So I sort of set myself the brief to hopefully design a chair that could stand just as a chair independent of the folding attribute.
And the unique thing about this chair, I guess, is that it's made of flat sheets of material, but it folds down this vertical centre line of the piece, which is not what usually happens with folding furniture.
It's sort of, it wasn't where I got the inspiration, but in some ways it's kind of a rigid director's chair. Folds in a very similar fashion to a director's chair.
Now, just a little story about the Stitch chair. I didn't realise you developed that at uni.
Well, no, it wasn't. I didn't. It was after university. So I had a folding chair project in which I designed a folding chair, but very different to the Stitch chair. But I just, after that, sort of embraced this love of mechanisms and furniture. And then, a number of years after finishing furniture, I started working on that. So I designed it afterwards.
And a little story, a little connection between you and I is that not long after you designed the chair, you came into the design consultancy that I was working at.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually made a 1/5 scale.
The miniature.
It was actually it was probably the best model I've ever made.
Yeah, that was
so
stunning.
I hope you still got it.
Yeah, I do still have it actually.
Took me hours.
In the lovely thin ply.
So I remember it well. And what was the reason for you coming into the consultancy that day? Was it initially to help with commercialising the idea?
Yeah, like I'd had some nice response to the chair, and I can't remember the name of the owner of the company, but he suggested he kind of had, some potential people, I think, who could be good to show, and it was kind of lifting the presentation of it, I guess. And that was quite early on in the design.
Yep. And can you talk us through the path to Capellini? Because we're talking about design commissions today, and I just want to give our listeners a sense of the journey from prototype to eventually having one of the biggest names in design agree to manufacture it for you and put it into production, which is every furniture designer's dream, right? And
it was amazing. Yeah, it was incredible for me. It's still an absolute career highlight. When all that happened. Yeah,
even those what is it now? 20 years ago plus.
20 years ago, probably. Yeah.
So how did it come about initially?
It really came about from a friend His lecturer works at UTS, Stefan Lee, also a designer, and he worked closely with a company called DDC, and they represented Capellini at the time. Giulio Capellini was coming out to DDC, and Tim England very kindly, I think he asked Stefan and some other designers, would you be interested to show some work to Giulio, being, he's kind of a talent scout for design. And Stefan very kindly rang me and said, would you like to show him some of his stuff? And I just couldn't believe it. So I rocked up at DDC.
That was very generous of Stefan, being another furniture designer.
Incredibly generous, yeah. I really owe Stefan a lot. It was amazing. So I came in the day, put the pieces there, then we left, and then I understand Giulio came and had a look at all the stuff and that kind of thing. So there was a bit of a connection made. I'd actually pretty much glued the chair together the previous night, so it wasn't welded, it was glued, because this all came about quite quickly. And I did hear that Giulio sat on it and the chair did the splits and broke, which I was mortified about when I found out. But yeah, I think it actually sort of created this little humorous connection.
And at least it left an indelible memory in
I
his brain.
I have heard when he has spoke, because he speaks a lot, talked about working with this Australian designer, and the first time the stitch chair he sat on it and broke it was a bit of a humorous thing. Yeah.
And so how did you reunite with Giulio Capellini after the initial meeting?
So I guess formed a little bit of a connection then, and he actually expressed interest in some other pieces, which I sent drawings over, and I was very excited and that kind of thing, but nothing eventuated with those pieces. And then the following year, I think I won a competition, luckily, to the Milan Furniture Fair, and off the back of that, because I had a bit of a connection with his assistant, I sent him an email and just said, would there be an opportunity to have a meeting with Giulio, which I did, had the meeting, and talked about the stitch I was very proud of the stitch chair, and talked about a number of pieces, but particularly the stitch chair, and he said, I'd really like to manufacture it. So I was on cloud 9, but there wasn't anything official. And then there was actually another company I'd met, and they said they were very keen to put in production. And when I got back to Australia, they actually sent me a contract to sign up, and I was in this absolute predicament thinking, oh no, what a great opportunity, but at the same time, is Capellini or Giulio, would they come through with what he was saying? So
how can you turn that down?
Well, I didn't know, so I sent an email to Giulio. I had Giulio's email by then, and I sent him an email saying, Giulio, I was just following up, are you potentially interested to put the stitch chair in production? Because I haven't, I felt a bit presumptuous, but I was just being honest, but there is another company that has popped up.
I was wondering whether you felt inclined to tell him that there was another offer on the table.
Well, I just thought I would be honest, but it was still, it was an email that was, oh goodness me.
Yeah.
And I sent it through, and 20 minutes later, I got an email from Giulio saying, I definitely want to put the stitch chair into production, and that was the beginning of it.
It worked. It worked.
Well, yeah, I don't know. So it was,
fantastic.
I can't tell you, obviously, how thrilled I was.
And so once he's said yes, is it a matter of back and forth communication with production guys there in terms of drawings and technical advice, liaison, etc.?
Very much back and forth, and I probably being quite hands-on, so I made full-size prototypes and all that kind of thing, and I sent off the drawings, but I said I think it'd be a good idea if I sent you the prototypes one-to-one and that kind of thing. So I did that, and then off the back of that, there was a lot of toing and froing. Originally we were going to, there's a hinge that connects the pieces, which creates the hinge, and then there's a pin that goes through to fasten them together. But it's quite complicated to have these big sheets and cut out the knuckles and bend them over, but that was the version that we were going to do to integrate the hinge, but it got quite expensive.
Right.
And then they came back, and it was actually the original way I made the prototype was mill out a section of the aluminium and drop a piano hinge in, and then rivet this piano hinge onto the edge to try and keep the cost down a little bit.
Okay, so you're using just a bog standard piano hinge that's been modified to suit a milled piece of aluminium?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it changed the look because mine, was kind of seamless, and now you could see these rivets. But it it was an interesting evolution. It just felt a little bit different. But I really liked it.
Yeah, right.
But what for me, not to be honest, I hadn't really worked with many companies before. But I just couldn't believe that. The littlest change is literally down to the millimetre would have to be okayed by me. They wouldn't sort of take anything for granted that they could amend anything without my approval.
Isn't that fantastic? Just honouring the designer.
The design, which, I definitely hadn't worked with a lot of companies, so I didn't know, but were, kind of existing in Australia. To be respected as a designer is definitely a very new thing.
Fantastic. What a culture to have over there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other one was the colours. I had 10 colours on there because there's 10 components. And Julio said, I think it's going to get too expensive if we do the multicolour version, the 10 colours. So we had to drop it back to 6 colours and we doubled up on some.
So there are limitations in terms of budget.
Yeah,
even with the big companies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like they asked me, how would you like your chair to be presented at Milan and that kind of thing. And I came back. I did an animation of this, all these stitch chairs together, suspended from the ceiling, and I wanted them to breathe open and shut.
Okay.
And Julia said, it's absolutely fantastic, I love it, but I don't think our budget will accommodate that. But it was just,
I'd like to see that.
And then after they said, we'll have to think of something else. So I designed how I wanted it presented, and that's exactly the way they presented it, which, it was just amazing.
That's awesome. So from saying yes to seeing it was it presented at the Milan Fair?
Milan Fair,
Is that a 12-month thing or a 24-month thing? What was the timescale?
I think that was the next year. That was the following year.
Right, so that's pretty quick.
It was pretty quick. Yeah, I had
months.
one trip to the factory to look at the prototypes in that time. That was amazing. And then after that, there they were, all these chairs at the fair. And
what was the feeling like on the day of the launch, coming to Milan as a bona fide, designer, and seeing your name up in lights, Adam Goodrum for Capellini.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. All these other designers that, sort of grew up absolutely worshipping.
Yeah.
And they were on the stand with other things and walking around, so it was fantastic. And
so after effects of doing a commission like that, how did it affect your career from that point on? Was it basically a key that opened up doors to other manufacturers? Yeah,
I think I think interestingly back in Australia, all of a sudden, there's this validation in some form because it's happened overseas, so more opportunities came in Australia. There was definitely opportunities that came about overseas as well. And probably, had my circumstances been a little bit different, with my wife Michelle and a relatively new child and stuff like that, if I was a single man, not that I wanted to be a single man, but if I was, I probably would have moved to Europe and potentially capitalised on this sort of recent success. And I probably even as my career's grown, it was such a significant moment for me, but I'm probably realising now actually how significant it was. It's kind of like it's getting almost signed with the best soccer team or something. It's just such this incredibly fortunate situation to be given.
And how difficult was that to stay in Australia?
Yeah, I would have really loved to have moved to Europe, to be honest, and been around where all the manufacturers are and that kind of thing. But in saying that, I think we're incredibly fortunate to live in Australia, and I'm very happy where my career has gone, to be honest. It's maybe probably a little bit different, but I'm very happy where my practice is at the moment.
And I guess it would have been, easier to knock on the door of an Australian manufacturer. Not saying Australia's any...
100% it opened doors back here. I think as well, It's a very different landscape in Australia now than what it was back then. And, as you know, it was really hard. There's next to no companies to work with. So we kind of had to endeavour overseas. But more recently, I think, there's been a greater appreciation for Australian design and more of an appetite. And specifiers are now, I think, proudly wanting to specify Australian furniture, which, sure, Australian furniture existed then, but not to the extent that it's doing so now.
So, in your opinion, is it harder to win that kind of work these days? Because judging by your story, it sounds like you need talent, of course, but you also need a little bit of luck.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just kind of being in the right spot at the right time and things just coming together. No, I think it's just as hard now, to be honest. But I think what is interesting now, the younger generation of designers, they don't even think about going to Europe to knock on those big companies' doors, because there does seem to be an industry here. There's a lot of relatively young designers doing their own things, self-manufacturing and doing it, or there seems to be more companies who are manufacturing in Australia. It's still boutique, but I just know from experience, I know other designers who are existing in Australia, either working with the company or working independently.
Yep. So you do see a lot of self-manufacturers these days, don't you?
Yeah, more and more. And it's
designers not relying on the patronage of a larger furniture manufacturer, but just going out and doing it on your own.
And because you can, a student coming out from an industrial design program, they're so equipped. Well, they're so equipped on one level. There's probably business side of it they have to learn, and obviously manufacturing knowledge takes a little while until you actually start manufacturing. But they're very equipped in that they can start a website very quickly and get their pieces out there on social media and all that kind of thing, which back then was definitely a lot harder to do.
So we were talking earlier about the notion of the furniture designer as opposed to the industrial designer. And I was telling you before how I used to be almost ashamed to admit that I designed furniture in a way, because I guess I didn't want to limit anyone's perceptions of what my skill base is like.
Yeah.
That I can only design bits of furniture, and but I can design other things as well. Packaging, appliances and that sort of thing. But you said that you're very proud to call yourself a furniture designer.
Yeah, well, to be honest, that's mainly what I've done. I'm probably my practice at the moment. I am pigeonholed as a furniture designer, and not over not being proud of being a furniture designer, but hopefully I want to communicate that my practice is just a creative practice and I can work on any project. But literally that's
it's harder to do though when the expectation and your back catalogue is mainly furniture.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
And that's where the majority of my inquiries when they come in are sort of furniture based for sure.
Do you ever get sick of designing furniture? Is it like if I ever see another three-seater sofa again, I'm going to go post it?
And do we need another chair in the world and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Really? Yes and no sometimes, but there is this kind of unfortunate obsession of this love for furniture. But in saying that, I sort of in my practice I work on many different things. Normally furniture, but I don't know.
But isn't furniture?
I still love it. I still hopefully take on every project as an exciting project, interrogate the brief, and try and do something different and those things. But it is challenging. It's a very saturated market, obviously.
You mean lots of competition?
Furniture, there's so many furniture companies, all doing very similar things.
Sure.
So it's challenging.
And as many designers.
And as many designers endeavouring to try and
Exactly. So, do you? And what's your process like? Do you work to? How often do you work to a brief as opposed to doing a clean slate design and doing the unsolicited proposal?
Yeah, probably, definitely that's how my career started, because I didn't have opportunities. So, and I wasn't even, I kind of, I think I was just naive, or, it was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't really see it as a business. I just loved designing things, and I'd get very excited when I came up with an idea and I just wanted to execute it. But a lot of those things, none of them really made me any money, I guess. But it's interesting looking back that probably those pieces, definitely contributed to creating a brand for me, which then helped later on when I did more commercial kind of work, which, gives me a little bit of an income, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't, so very rarely now would I probably, just work on a new design and then go show it to someone. Yeah, majority, unless something just comes about and I get so excited, I just want to do it. And then maybe if I'm already working with the company, I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? But normally everything I work on pretty much comes from a brief.
Yeah. And do you like working that way?
Yeah, I do like working that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
I guess you get the challenge laid out to you, and then
it's just much more strategic. I guess the only thing is I sort of I do work a little bit, like at the moment I collaborate with a guy, Arthur, and he is a craftsman who focuses on straw marquetry, which is a very specific kind of craft. And we've teamed up and we're doing these pieces together, but they're very unique, one-off kind of pieces. So kind of it's a lovely platform just to be incredibly creative and not be preoccupied with, costs of production or that kind of thing, but it's purely creative.
And do you need those kinds of projects to keep the fire burning, in a sense?
I very much enjoy working over different projects at the same time, but literally at the moment that's what I'm working on, and I very much enjoy it.
Speaking of, the designer as a brand, it occurs to me that, very few designers have crafted a certain look. Most designers don't have a consistent style or a visual language. Like many of us, I don't think you've got a particular design language in your
I think it's very
catalogue.
Eclectic. But it is interesting. I receive an email, and the first thing might be, we really appreciate the way you design things, or something like that.
Yeah.
It might not be specifically a style.
Right. And is that a conscious decision to not have a particular style, or is that just how it evolved?
Definitely not conscious. No, it's just it's just how it's come about. I haven't definitely have not been strategic enough to think I need a particular style or anything like that. It's just the only thing I think. When I started out my career, there was probably more of a formula back then. That was probably more on the artistic side of things, and maybe it's a little bit interesting now that I am getting an opportunity to fall back. I can do these more sort of artistic projects, and I think there would. I don't know if style is the right word, but there definitely are components of that I'm fascinated in that maybe comes through in the work.
Okay. So let's talk about a couple of other collaborations that you've had over the years. One, a little one with Alessi.
Yeah.
Did you, like in those days, did you have a plan, or did you literally go from one opportunity to the next?
No, not smart enough to have a plan. I just, if there was I think I've always been, I don't know if ambitious is the right word, but I've just, I think I'm a hard worker, and I just get very excited about projects and I get into things. Alessi, my project that came about a few years ago, I'd actually met with them a lot earlier, and they'd expressed interest in a few pieces and went through the whole process, and then they were too expensive to produce and it didn't end up happening. And then the most recent opportunity came through a competition actually, and I was lucky enough to win the competition and went over, and that project went into production. So that's how that came about.
Did that lead to any other opportunities, or?
Yes, I'm still in contact with them. Since then, there has been projects which they expressed interest in, and unfortunately, they get down to certain. You think they're all happening, and then they're very careful, what goes through it. It's got to tick all the boxes in regards to costs and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And things haven't, gone to the next step. But yeah, in contact with them as a company.
So do you think, big companies like Alessi, Capellini, Herman Miller, the design iconic companies, as their catalogue grows, do you think they are in danger of having their legacy diluted with too much stuff? I mean, take for example Alessi. They've got thousands of products today, and I'm only guessing here, but I feel like in the 90s they reached their zenith, and whether they've fallen off a little bit because there's just too much competition and there's just an accumulation of too many designs out there in the world today, I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think definitely back in the 90s when they probably were maybe in their heyday, there was very few companies in comparison to them, and then them being such a leader, I think there's a lot of companies, sort of jumped on their bandwagon, and it's a very saturated market. But they're still such an amazing company.
Of course,
still do amazing projects. But I think just, generally it's probably not, such a saturation of products, the last thing the world needs. But I guess the clever companies have to reinvent, keep changing with the times or being the leader and doing those things. That's what all, I think, the forward-thinking companies endeavour to do.
It would certainly be a challenge to stay ahead of the game, wouldn't it? I mean, and I just wonder whether, when China became a factor in terms of manufacturing furniture and other design pieces, how much they impacted, the design companies that had it all basically back in the 90s.
Absolutely, of course. The price points and people not really appreciating what's a real piece of furniture and what's a fake piece of furniture, and very comfortable to buy the fake one, and all those kind of things has been crippling for a lot of the industry. Yeah.
But I guess it's a testament to their culture and their culture and attitude towards design, that they've survived and they're thriving today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I still Australia, for me in my career, has changed dramatically, because I think there does seem to be an industry now that exists, which I don't know if it's just because I've grown, but I think back when I started it was very challenging.
How has it changed?
They just seem, there's a lot more designers, I think, creating Australian design, and there's more companies who are embracing, projects that go on. The architects are specifying a lot more Australian furniture. If you think of all the showrooms that existed 20 years ago, most of them would have had no Australian furniture on the floor. Some of them would have had a tiny amount of Australian furniture on the floor. Cult Design now, who I've worked with, a massive part of their business is Australian design. Stylecraft, a massive part of their business is Australian design. And that definitely didn't exist before. That's new. So that, there's a market there, unless they wouldn't have it on the floor, unless there's a market there with an appetite for it.
Sure.
Yeah. But sorry, back to your original point. When I do go to Milan, though, it is just infectious. The culture of design in Italy. It's just, it embraces everyone and everything, and down to the, I guess, mechanics is a little bit different, but they're just so proud of their craft. A mechanic will have their doors up and be showing off where they work, and it's just so lovely, their culture. How is
the attitude and the culture towards design in Milan or Europe in general different to Australia?
Well, yeah, I think that's it. There wasn't this culture of design in Australia previously, and I think we've really grown a lot. And I know for me, I work very closely with two companies, Colt and Tate, and I don't really look overseas now because I have such close relationships with them, and the whole way they go about with their branding and all those things, which Italy has always done and been very clever with those kind of things. So I think we're definitely merging. We used to live in the shadow of Europe. But I think we're kind of finding our own way in Australia now.
It's great to have patrons, isn't it, to support designers' work, like Tate and Cult that you mentioned, and Stylecraft in Australia. I guess it's sort of like the design companies of today. They're sort of like the patrons of like the Renaissance artists, like the Medicis, right? You know, they're the ones that support artists and designers' ideas, right? And through them, only through them, that we are able to express, you know, our ideas. And we were talking a bit about, you know, whether you get sick of designing furniture and that sort of thing. And for me, it's like furniture design is just a medium for creativity. So furniture design, I guess in my opinion, is like your blank canvas. And on that blank canvas, you can create different paintings. So it's the same sort of thing with furniture. It's just a type of media for creativity. Outlet, it's a channel for expression.
And it, you know, it's a lovely. You know, it's not like a house that, you know, has so many components to it. Architecture has so many components to it. You know, it's this feasible scale. You know, it works with the body. You know, it gives you comfort. It's definitely very aesthetic in regards to its form, but it's just it's a feasible outlet, to create things.
And it's interesting you mentioned how design culture has changed in Australia over the past 20 years. Do you think that's got something to do with, you know, design becoming, just social awareness about design has increased exponentially?
Absolutely.
Whether that's through, you know, design TV shows, magazines, obviously internet and social media has had a massive impact on that. People just are a lot more aware of different types of designs, you know, who the leading designers in the world are today. Just a general awareness has increased exponentially.
To be honest, I don't know exactly why. I remember reading a statistic many years ago that Australia had the highest number of design magazines in a country in the world behind New Zealand, who was in front of us, interestingly. You know, and back then I thought, gee, Australia doesn't seem has a very strong design culture.
Okay.
But I don't know, you know, maybe there was this appetite, but we hadn't properly embraced it. You know, but it does make total sense. It's kind of crazy that here we are on the other side of the world and we're importing furniture all the way down here. You know, it's like good cooking, you know, you should be grabbing your vegetables from your backyard where you grow them.
Right.
So, you know, to design locally and make locally just makes so much more sense.
Absolutely. On every level.
On every level. Like as a designer, I work very closely with all, you know, like the companies I work with, like Tate and Cult, but then also the makers. Tate does their in-house manufacturing, but Cult outsources their manufacturing. And I have very close relationships with all the manufacturing people, and that's just so important. You know, it's so exciting to be working with an overseas company, but it's very challenging when you're looking at images via Skype and that kind of thing. But to go out, work with the manufacturer and resolve details on the spot, you know, if it is a chair, to see it in one-to-one, walk around it, and then obviously to sit in it in regards to comfort, you know, it's so much easier as a designer. And the speed of things, you know, off the back of a project, if there is another project which requires customisation, you know, you can do it quickly, and it just makes sense on every level.
So for the budding furniture designer who is interested in, you know, forging a career in that space, what sort of advice could you give to them? I mean, back in our day, I think it was a matter of literally knocking on doors, right? Knocking on every door that came up in a magazine, calling lots and emailing lots of, you know, design houses, proposing different designs and just gauging interest. Do designers of the next generation do it differently?
Well, I think those companies that we would email, back in the day, those companies, they're still wanting fresh young designs. So, they base their business on working with young designers doing great things. But I think, it's just as hard as it was back then. I think it's still very hard. But as we were talking about before, I think it's there's much more of an opportunity for designers just to literally do it themselves. And because they can do their social media and their website and
crowdfunding,
manufacturing now. Crowdfunding, manufacturing is pretty easy now. Whether it's a little to do it in Australia, you can get things done. Obviously, China is amazing in regards to getting things made, but it's a lot easier to get stuff done. So companies, start the self-manufacturing. Then there's companies that have just grown quite quickly, designed by them who are students here. Dow Jones down in Melbourne, young owners who have just grown as furniture companies, and they've done it all independently.
Yeah, and that's terrific. We touched on a little bit earlier about you needed an element of luck as well as talent, but a little bit of luck helps. But I was just thinking that that's true, but you have to make your own luck. Like, that was a lucky introduction that you got with Giulio Capellini 20 years ago. But you put yourself in that space, and like you made that happen in a way. It's not serendipitous entirely.
I think it's exactly a little bit of luck, but I think you have to show a bit of grit, and put yourself in probably what is challenging situations to hopefully make that luck come through as to something more concrete.
And is the expectation of the generation coming through now that it should happen faster?
I don't want to say that, but maybe so. I think sometimes I think things happen so easily.
In the day of Instagram.
Well, it does look, you see the glossy magazines and, it all looks rosy from the outside, but, it's still hard to make a living from it. It's still quite an indulgent sort of artistic path, really.
Yep. Do you think there's an opportunity to, if you wanted to forge a career in furniture design, does it help to plan? Does it help to have some sort of strategy, do you think?
I'm probably not the I've never been very good with planning and that kind of thing.
No, that wasn't your way.
Maybe I have been fortunate that I've always been a very hard worker, and I really, I'm sure like yourself, you're just obsessed with designing things. You come up with an idea and you just wanted to realise it, and then you'd have this object at the end. Maybe, that's something to comment on. I really don't think just to have an idea and do a rendering, has really got much legs. I think it's very important to go through and create the prototype and have a piece. And I think as a young designer, competitions are only whoever are the people judging it, their kind of opinion who might win it. But I still think competitions are good because it gives you a kick up the pants to work to a deadline, and normally a competition requires a finished piece. So I think competitions definitely, when you're young, are a good thing to get involved in.
Yep. So we're coming up to the end of our little chat, and I always end the chat with a question to my guests. And the question that I want to ask you is there a design commission you would covet over all else?
I don't know. I was meant to think about that. To be honest with you, I've just, my parents lived down the coast, and I was in the middle of the fires and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's very interesting after being in the middle of that, and it was literally Armageddon, and then I'm working on this project for an exhibition which is in Melbourne in March, and they're incredibly high-end, one-off art pieces. They're going to be quite expensive and that kind of thing, and it was kind of weird, being down amongst all this catastrophe and then coming up and working on these very luxury pieces. So, to be honest, I don't know if there's at the moment, there's not something that I would really desire, other than I would really, probably as an independent thing, I want to really start trying to make an effort to work on some more ethical projects, to be honest. I'm a very passionate surfer. When I go surfing in Indonesia, the amount of plastic in the water is just unbelievable. What's happened down the coast, to see it firsthand, it's just been horrific. So
it's interesting to hear you say that, because with the recent bushfires, I think it's affected everybody.
Yeah, well, it just changes your mindset.
Scale.
Like, I was down there with some friends who are architects, and we're all kind of just going, I don't know if I can just go back this year and start doing, they were saying designing these beautiful houses, and it just doesn't seem right. So anyway, more as an independent thing, I'd really like to start focusing on some things that hopefully contribute on a much broader level, rather than creating, some, which I love doing, the pretty objects, but doing something with a lot more substance, whether it's systems or,
And a big thanks to Adam Goodrum for sharing with us his fascinating insights. Now, who would you like to hear me interview in future episodes of the show? Well, you can leave your suggestions in the comments section of this podcast. You can also direct message me, or you can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Remember to share this episode with other designers and architects who share our passion for furniture design. But until the next episode, it's bye for now.